Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today's continuation of the What's Next series covers the Denver Nuggets, who are coming off of their most successful season in a while, breaking a playoff drought and coming within one game of reaching the Western Conference Finals. And the future for this team looks to be relatively bright, as I'll talk about in the building blocks section. They're young, have an okay amount of flexibility moving forward, have some high-level talent, and an identity as a team that should set themselves up as a top 4 to 5 team in the West moving forward. However, as we saw this season, the issue for this team is going to be going from a successful regular season team and a marginally successful postseason team to one that is a true championship contender. So let's go ahead and see what options they have to try and get there. First up, let's look at the considerable amount of future building blocks for the Denver Nuggets. First is Nikola Jokic, who started off the first season of a max rookie extension that he just signed last offseason by putting himself into the conversation for the best big man in the entire league. It wasn't necessarily a surprise that he played as well as he did. This was a jump that a lot of people saw coming, but the strides that he made as an offensive focal point also translated to a ton of team success, and that was the most impressive part. Whether or not they can compete for a championship with Jokic as their best player is questionable at this point, but he is still an outstanding player. Next is Gary Harris, who overall took a step back this season, but still deserves to be in this section as of right now. He played in only 57 games because of injury, had his worst shooting season since his rookie year, and just overall wasn't as effective of a player. Now, you can certainly blame that on the injury issues if you want to, but that has been a fairly constant problem for him in his career so far, missing 25, 15, and 25 games over the last 3 seasons respectively. And although he is locked up on a relatively team-friendly deal long-term and provides some nice shot creation and shooting alongside Jamal Murray, this team really can't afford for the kind of season he just had to become the new norm for him if they want to reach their true potential. Moving on now to the previously mentioned Jamal Murray, he saw a slight jump in his per-game scoring numbers in his third NBA season, though that predictably came on less efficient shooting numbers compared to last year as well. He is obviously a promising young player that the team will want to keep around, but it isn't quite that simple, as I'll talk about in the free agency section, with Murray going into a contract year next season. Finishing up the building block section, I want to talk about 3 young players in order of when their contracts expire that are at the very least intriguing and in some cases very valuable to the Nuggets. The first is Malik Beasley, who is a 2020 restricted free agent just like Murray, but showed incredible improvement this season when given more opportunity with players such as Harris missing so many games and became a key member of the rotation. He's a great athlete and off-ball shooter that still needs to make strides as a defender and add a bit of shot creation to his game to really round it all out. But overall, I'm really high on his continued improvement and possibility of being a long-term piece for this team, assuming they bring him back next offseason. Next is Monte Morris, who might be one of the best bargain players across the entire league at the moment. In the past, he'd kind of gone back and forth between the Nuggets and their G League affiliate, but he really found a nice role this season as a solid backup point guard, making about $1.5 million a season for his next 2 years on his contract. The biggest reason for his improvement, as is the case for many young players, was his ability to become a consistent three-point shooter. The way that the Nuggets structure their offense around Jokic so much, even on-ball guards need to be able to make the defense pay off the ball by being a threat from the outside, not on a ton of volume, but enough to keep them honest and open up the rest of his game. And last up now is really just a player that I'm intrigued by, and that's why they make it into this section, and that is the Nuggets' first-round pick last year, Michael Porter Jr. Many of you know his story. He was an extremely highly touted high school prospect that had some injury issues in his one season in college, which caused him to drop a ton on draft night last year, all the way down to the Nuggets in the late lottery. He didn't play at all as a rookie, but reports have surfaced that he's healthy and ready to be on the court for 2019 Summer League play. How he plays there and how healthy he looks will give us a bit of an indication of how good he'll be in his first true NBA season, and he certainly has the kind of ceiling that could elevate this Nuggets team into the upper tier of teams in the league if absolutely everything goes right for him. Moving on to the draft, there's nothing to talk about here as they traded their first-round pick to the Nets last offseason for taking on the salary of Kenneth Faried, so let's just move on to free agency. As of right now, the Nuggets are on pace for over $120 million in team payroll for next season, which is well over the salary cap and gives them no salary cap space. But there is still a ton to talk about in this section for Denver. The biggest one is the fact that they hold a $30 million team option for Paul Millsap's contract for next season, which is a huge deal because typically you don't see team options for high salary players, but this gives the team a ton of flexibility, and I would be shocked if they decided to bring Millsap back on that big of a salary given their current situation, despite his value to this team and the veteran leadership that he brings. He just isn't the player that he used to be and is in his mid-30s and certainly isn't worth $30 million next season, so they do go through with the likely event of declining his option. Suddenly they're sitting at about $91 million in team salary for next season, which is a lot more manageable and gives them some room to work with in free agency, about $18 million worth. And really that's the only big free agent that they have this summer. The Isaiah Thomas experiment didn't work out, so he's probably gone, and Trey Lyles and Tyler Lydon might end up being brought back, but they really aren't significant enough players to spend any time on here. So as you look at the big picture, the Nuggets are in a pretty good spot for this summer. They've got Jokic, Harris, and Morris signed to long-term deals. Porter Jr. is on his rookie deal. Beasley and Murray don't hit free agency until next year, and the contract of Mason Plumlee will be coming off the books next offseason to give them even more flexibility that summer. The only real issue I see here and a notable omission from the building blocks category is Will Barton. He, just like Harris, had a lot of injury issues this season and just never really looked like himself, and at times in the postseason he looked borderline unplayable. On top of that, the team just gave him a new contract last offseason that pays him $12 to $15 million a year for the next 3 seasons that at the time seemed a bit too rich given the salary cap climate around the league. The difference between him and Harris, who's actually on a more expensive contract moving forward, is age. Harris is simply younger and has more room to grow than Barton, who will be entering his early 30s during his current contract. It isn't a gigantic issue because that contract really isn't all that expensive, but for a team like the Nuggets that would like to avoid the luxury tax while also building a championship contender, even medium-sized missteps like the Barton contract can have huge consequences. But let's get back to the big picture for the Nuggets. In my opinion, if they're going to make a move in free agency, this summer would be a good time. They'll have the space if they decline Millsap's option, and this will likely be the last summer that'll be the case, assuming they want to bring back Beasley and Murray in 2020. They should target either more help on the wings to guard against possible regression from Beasley, Torrey Craig, and or that Porter Jr. never works out, or a floor spacing replacement for Millsap at the 4 spot. Players like Terrence Ross and Nikola Mirotic come to mind first here, but really there are a lot of options this summer at either of those spots that the Nuggets could explore. When you account for the salary of whatever player or players they bring in this summer, the expired contract of Plumlee in 2020, and extensions for Beasley and Murray, who are 2 players that I definitely think they should bring back so long as the contracts are reasonable, this team will likely be over the salary cap, but should be safely under the luxury tax from 2020 on, with their entire core still intact. The only obstacle to that would be if Murray has a crazy good season next year and they have to pay him something approaching a max rookie extension, and in that case they would have to consider either letting Murray or Beasley walk or move the Barton contract to stay away from the luxury tax. But either way, there are plenty of scenarios in which this Nuggets team continues to be a top 4 or 5 team in the West moving forward, and very few in which they regress back to the lottery within Jokic's time with the team, which is a great spot to be in. Like I said in the intro, youth, talent, and to a certain extent flexibility aren't an issue with this team, but what might be is a lack of true top-end talent. Jokic is outstanding, but it's increasingly hard to build a championship-level team around a big guy, and I'm not convinced that they have the perimeter talent to be a true contender right now. Murray is really good, but everybody else is pretty unproven. Harris might continue to struggle with injuries, Beasley is likely just a complimentary player, Barton is getting older, and Porter Jr.'s future is completely up in the air, even though his ceiling might be able to boost this team up a little bit further. So they're probably just going to be a good team moving forward rather than a great one without some major changes. Maybe they find a way to package together Harris and or Murray and some picks or Porter Jr. for an all-NBA caliber perimeter player down the road, but right now that's my big question mark for this team. How do they get from just really good to great? And honestly, there doesn't seem to be much of an answer to that I can see at the moment. that isn't necessarily a bad thing. There are a lot of fan bases that would trade what they have right now for the success that the Nuggets just had and look to continue to be on pace for, but it's also important for their fans to put understandable expectations on this team moving forward. And that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.